So, see if you can digest this in. How you see the outside world. Wait, sure nobody's coughing, blowing their nose, anything. All right. How you see the outside world is how you see yourself. Ouch! How you see the outside world is how you see yourself. And so we have the opportunity to do what with the way in which we see the world? Change our perception, look at the law of relativity, and to understand that one person is having a spectacular day while the other person is having a horrific day. And it's still the same day. And so when we began to look at the levels of opportunity, sometimes we get tired of hearing personal responsibility. How about the levels of opportunity in terms of perception? Then we can go on an amazing journey. And that journey, hopefully, is a journey of curiosity. And I'm going to give you a little history lesson. Sometime around in the early 1940s, they uncovered in a cave in Egypt what are now called the Gnostic Gospels. These were big chunks of papyrus that were wrapped up in these leather-bound satchels that had been sitting there since right around 200 AD. And they found them in 1945. And so as they began to decipher the language, and they saw that they were Gospels written by the Gnostics, who were really the first voice of Christianity. So Gnosticism, or the Gnostics, were really the first voice of Christianity long before Orthodox Christianity came into play. And so 200 AD, about 325 AD, all of the bishops were assembled at what is called the Council of Nicaea in Constantinople. And they were governed by Constantine I. And this assembly was really for all of the bishops to decide what was going to go in the Bible. Did you know that? A bunch of men sat around and decided what was going to be included in the Bible. But even more fascinating was what would be the main interpretation of this man, Jesus the Christ? Would he be elevated to something, the Son of God, which would then create separation, which would make him the exception? Or would he be shown as the wise human teacher that he was, who transcended all human limitation and obtained that level of what we call Christ consciousness, and thus became the great example? And as they gathered together in this Council of Nicaea to determine what this would look like, there also were the Gnostic Gospels. And so the Gnostic Gospels, the one you probably may have heard of is the Gospel of Thomas, which is a beautiful, beautiful book, high mysticism, just really a glorious read that re-emphasizes the fact that the power is within us, and that to the degree that we take that power and perceive that beautiful luminosity, that illumination of life, is the degree in which we become that and experience that. So that level of mysticism is in the Gospel of Thomas. There's also the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene showed that she was of high authority, hung around the other 12 disciples, and was a great influence upon the master teacher, Jesus. And then there was the Gospel of Judas. And a hush fell over the crowd. There was a Gospel of Judas. What was rescued, or what was saved in its entirety of the Gospel of Judas, was what we would think to be the equivalent of maybe 20 to 24 pages that had not been deteriorated. But what is transcribed from that and interpreted from that is something completely different than the story that you know about Judas and what is depicted in the Gospels in now the New Testament. So, by the way, in this assembly, the Gospel of Thomas, Mary Magdalene, and Gospel of Judah didn't make the cut. Right? They didn't make the cut. there was a lot of personal empowerment in these particular Gnostic Gospels. And so it was decided, how can we govern the masses better? But let me tell you a little bit about the Gospel of Judas. The Gospel of Judas revealed that Judas and Jesus were buds. They were hugely close, deep, deep abiding friendship. And of the 12 disciples, the one that really was the most attentive and the most progressive and the one who wholeheartedly gave himself to understanding and learning the ways of the consciousness that Jesus was emanating was Judas. And in the Gospel of Judas, Jesus comes to Judas and says, I need a favor. I need you to betray me. Jesus asks Judas to betray him because without that particular act, there would not be that miraculous understanding or the revelation of the fact that life is indeed eternal. And so Jesus, in his infinite wisdom, already knew what eternality was, had already gained that insight, was already ready and prompt to be that divine example, and he needed someone to play that role. So can you imagine Judas, who loved him dearly, accepting the responsibility of that? And going down in history, not that he cares now wherever he is about what history says about him, but in that moment, the challenge of being able to play that role. And it's a beautiful consideration, and if you're interested, I highly recommend that you study the Gnostic Gospels. There were a couple of years that I just pored over them line by line, stanza by stanza, drinking in what really felt relevant to me. In fact, I was so enamored by them and so enthused that when I lived in Mobile, Alabama, I was called to a local Baptist university to come and speak on comparative religions. You already know where this is going. So I'm in this magnificent classroom that's one of those stadium seats where, you know, the professor is down here and the rows go up like that. And so I'm standing down and I'm talking about mental science principles. I'm talking about the power of mind to create. I'm talking about the Gnostic Gospels and esoteric wisdom. And when I mention the Gnostic Gospels, one of these 19, 20-year-olds stands up, fist in the air, and shouts, "Heretic!" And you know how it just takes one, right? And then it sort of ripples and unleashes, and before I knew it, all of the classroom was standing on their feet, shouting out names at me as I stood in that arena. It was the most incredible thing. Because, you know, we have this fight or flight syndrome, right? And so a lot of times when we are in the midst of something uncomfortable, we want to flee. But how powerful is it to actually remain in that and to absorb and to experience that energy, to let that energy kind of go through you, to let yourself feel every single thing. And I was so excited because I had brought trifolds and business cards. Nobody took any of those. And when the dust settled and I left and I sat in my car, I remember my hands sort of shaking. And it wasn't from fear, but it was almost, and I don't know what other word to choose, but it was almost like this transmission of some kind of new awareness and new evolvement had happened to me because I didn't flee. And I had stood there and I had accepted it, didn't defend it. I just went, wow, this is amazing. And you see, when we talk about crucifixion, when we talk about those things that are relatable to something like a Judas, our immediate thing is to either flee or to go into a place of self-imposed imprisonment and begin to stagnate. In other words, to stay locked in that experience, to not let it kind of go through you and ripple so that you have a resurrected idea about who you are. You have a resurrected idea of the fact that all those kinds of things that come at you are not something that can create a demise, but can actually empower you and have a greater sense of self. And when you think about Judas and the role that he was willing to play in order to show this divine example of betrayal and ultimate resurrection, is not just a cute little story or not just a narrative in some religious history, but it's an archetype by which all of us live. So, for example, we all have had the Judas experience in our lives. We have those people who we call Judas. We look at those particular moments, and as we look at them, we do so with great probably disdain, sorrow, anger, bitterness, wishing that somehow things had been different or that we had never met them. Any of you ever wished that someone would just leave? If they would just go away. If this situation would just go away, then my life would be so much better. And what did we say in the beginning? Life just is. Life just is. And until we move into a mastery program of consciousness, which allows us to not shun those things away, but to welcome them and to begin to let them transmute and transmogrify in us so that we learn more about the stability and the allness of that which is, then we begin to become aware of the power of who we are. If our power is dictated, our personal power is dictated by the winds of change and the trends and the way in which other people act, then you and I will never, ever, ever touch the beauty of exhibiting that personal power because it will be at the mercy of. So think about that. Did then this Jesus the Christ, this master teacher, obviously knew of that personal power? So much so that he said, I need you to betray me so that I can do this thing, to be able to relay this story so that generation after generation, person after person, example after example can begin to learn the true, infinite power of what resurrection means. And what that is then is a daily diagram by which you and I have the opportunity to live. Because daily we die a little, and daily we rise a little, according to our conscious participation of it. So let's break it down a little bit. That which Christ is, we are. That's something that if you're familiar with this philosophy or you're a spiritual seeker, truth person, that doesn't sound too far off. But maybe if you're visiting, you've never heard that before. But that which Christ is, we are. By Christ, we're not talking about a person. We're talking about consciousness. That which is Christ consciousness, that high elevated thought, that which knows, that which is infinite intelligence itself, we are. We are that. Now, we have the ability through persona, individuality, to operate in degrees of that. So if I accept that, then the degree of that consciousness and that power will have a lot of permission to play within my persona. To the degree that I resist that, deny that, or I'm just completely ignorant of it, is the degree in which I will be at the mercy of some kind of form of effect. But as we break it down, fundamentally, that which is that intelligence, that which is Christ, that which was possessed by and exhibited by and lived by Jesus the Christ, is what we are. So again, his name wasn't Jesus Christ, and his middle initial wasn't H. Jesus H. Christ. He was Jesus. And Christ is the moniker. Christ is the moniker, meaning Jesus who obtained Christ consciousness. Okay? And so your name, Christ. That's what you are. That's what we are. Christ wasn't the last name. And so then next we break it down. That which understands that we transcend, that which understands that we transcend, for we are eternal, is also within us. So that means that which knows eternality, that which knows that you've already won, that which knows the ultimate goodness of life, that which understands and realizes that everything is energy, lies within all of us. It rests within all of us. Again, in degree. To the degree that I'm aware of that, or I'm even interested in that, is the degree in which that will begin to unfold for me and work for me. To the degree that, again, I'm either ignorant of it or dismissive of it or shout heresy at that, is the degree in which it will remain contained. But it is still there inside of us because it is ultimately what we are. It does not resurrect from its dormancy unless we are willing to die to our false self. So in other words, for this resurrected power to come and individualize itself through us, it needs our permission. It needs us to be able to walk to every single thing in life and go, you are welcomed here. Because what I know that you bring to me is something that I get to transmute on this altar of choice. And I can either look at this, bring me the day. Don't bring me just the nice day. Don't bring me just the marginally half good day. Bring me all the days. And let me lay those days on the altar of my ability to transmute, transmogrify, change, and understand and see the beauty that is contained within every single moment. Bring me that. Judas then does not become a traitor, but a friend. A friend who is facilitating our rebirth. Can you imagine if everything that was uncomfortable or painful, we somehow had a little genie lamp and we rubbed it, and our one wish was, take away everything that is uncomfortable or painful. You and I would never grow. You would not be here today, nor would you ever move from where you are today. And so as we begin to understand this, you can think about the 13th century Rumi mystic poet, Rumi, who wrote The Guest House, and it said, this being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house. Can you imagine? Crowd of sorrows. Not home, no one's here. Crowd of sorrows. Not going away. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably, for it may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Again, it reminds me of one of my favorite phrases from Neil Donald Walsh. I have sent you nothing but angels. Yes, even that person. I have sent you nothing but angels. So in that sort of paradoxical energy, we're like, wait a minute. So pause for a moment. Think back at the person who put you off the most. Think about that. What did you learn from that? If anything. You know, you have to be somewhat conscious to learn something, but we learn from that. And I'm not talking about levels of bitterness or learning revenge techniques. Well, I went and took an archery class, and I learned how to do a bullseye and nip it in the bud. No, that's not. I'm learning about ourselves. I'm learning about resilience. You know, there are so many amazing stories. A woman's husband leaves her, and she doesn't even know what she's capable of because her whole life has been sort of this underlying belief that he was the one that did everything. You've read, how many stories have you read? And then when they are forced to go to the edge of the cliff, and at the edge of the cliff to jump and discover that they have wings. But that's a universal story for everybody because we can go to the edge of the cliff and go, I don't think so. But the cliff is all about jumping. And what I like in Judas is that he goes with us to the cliff and then he just kind of goes like that. Nana liked that one. Just kind of, gives us a little head start to fly. And again, unless that happens, unless we are willing to move out of this cocoon that we keep trying to preserve everything as it is, then we don't grow. We don't have the resurrections that are eagerly waiting for us to experience. And so here are the commonalities that all of us have. We have all had a divine birth, meaning that we're all spirit in form. Every single one of us in here, we've been born, we are a part of that which is spirit, and so we personalize that in our own unique fashion. That's true for all sentient beings. The other thing that's true, all of us have had a Herod figure in our families or our lives. Go back to the Christmas story. King Herod feels threatened, tries to do what? Tries to protect himself by diminishing anybody else who might be remotely better. You know, have you ever been around those people who feel threatened by your greatness, your creativity? And so in doing that, they go all out to try to suppress that. So we've all had a Herod figure in our life, which caused us or allowed us to either flee away or flee within. And see, that fight or flight response is, it doesn't really work for us to run away from that situation, but to go inward so that we can begin to reclaim the truth of who we are. All of us have had years of wandering in the wilderness. Some of you are still there. When our purpose, it's only dimly heard. It's only dimly heard or understood maybe marginally, if at all. And this is what I love. You know, the actual distance for the Jews going into the promised land that took them 40 years, right? You know, they've mapped it out. It's a little bit more than 2 hours drive time. Seriously. That's where all of that stuff about not asking for directions came into play. Years of wandering in the wilderness. And see, all you have to do is ask. Because everywhere around you, there is this thing that is wanting to lift us up into a higher realm. But if we don't ask, we continue to wander unnecessarily. All of us have had what we call moments of baptism. My Pentecostal's going to come out. Moments of baptism where you start to feel the call of something greater within you. And you actually get a clear-cut decision of what it looks like you want to dedicate your life to. We've had these moments of baptism, and we've had those moments when tempted to give up. It's that sort of meteoric high that we feel when we go someplace or go to a retreat, go to a workshop, sit at the feet of a guru, involve ourselves in something, and we're on that moment of baptism, and then we leave. And it's as if it all trickles back down into that thing which is human. You know, it happens here every Sunday because I watch you. The moment you get in your car, you're just as mean as can be. But you have a moment of baptism in here. I'm just trying to see how can I get you to take it home with you. You get on Facebook and you just mean. We have all, after we've been mean, recommitted ourselves, admitted our transgressions. We came back next Sunday. We admitted our transgressions, and we do that cycle all over again. And all of us have had the Judas betrayals. All of us have had the Judas betrayals. Some of them, I stand with you, some of them have taken my breath away, the level of those betrayals. They're just phenomenal to me. And yet, this is the beautiful thing about hindsight and our willingness to look at life differently. When you look back at that, you do not wish that it had not happened, because you see the divine perfection and the role in which that crucifixion played into the resurrection that you and I are experiencing right now. That's a tough one, but it's an essential one. My first teacher was Louise Hay, and I remember sulking on the road one night in the van because I didn't get an acting job. And I was blaming my mother, and I was blaming the weather, and I was just blaming everything for that. And I was like, if I had just gone to this school, I mean, I was just in a bad place. And she just listened. And she said, honey, one of these days you will realize that you get to honor the entirety of your journey. And I didn't like it at the time, but it's true. When we become to honor the Judases in our lives, those beautiful, and I do say deliberately, the beautiful betrayals, then we start to see that we have stepped up and we have said yes to the grooming of our soul's assignment to be far more than we have settled for. And here's the really cool thing. This does not stop just because you have reached a certain age. We resurrect and find new nuance and new perspectives and new pockets of power within us that we didn't even know were there until our last breath, if we choose. But God forbid any of us reach something, and because society says that's it, we stop. Do not stop. Begin to cherish all of the opportunities that are there. The amazing Joseph Campbell wrote, what has always been basic to resurrection or to Easter is crucifixion. If you want to resurrect, you must have crucifixion. Too many interpretations of the crucifixion have failed to emphasize that. They emphasize the calamity of the event. Do you know what I mean by the calamity of the event? In other words, they just focus on crucifixion. That's one of the challenges sometimes when I go into big chapels and, it's just Jesus on the cross. I'm like, he ain't there, But that's focusing on the calamity of the event. But sometimes we're there as well. And as that great mystic Dolly Parton once said, get off the cross. People need the wood. Praise Dolly. Yeah. So this thing called life is not a calamity. It's not. However, you have every single right to look at it that way, because that's the power and the gift of our free will. If you dare entertain to look at these Gnostic Gospels, you will be so beautifully overcome by the wisdom and the groundedness and the mystical nature of these things that remind us of who we are That which is God, that which is what the choir so beautifully sang, those elements are what we are. We are that. When we can become our own intercessor and realize that we have the ability to take all of those crucifixions and to welcome them in, because we know that without that, we wouldn't be able to move into the territory. Have you ever had those moments where you go, man, I don't know why this is happening, but obviously I am being groomed for something really spectacular? That's an idea. That's a way that you and I get to look at it. How you see the outside world, how you see the outside world is how you see yourself. Think about that. So I invite you to see life through this white light of purity. And to the degree that we see this thing called life in all of its beautiful chaos, through this beautiful white illuminated light of purity, is the degree in which we know purity, is the degree in which we begin to understand the power of who and what we are. That all religions, that all peoples, that all faiths, all walks of life, all origins, every single one is bringing their brand of being to the playing field of resurrection. And wouldn't it be awesome if we all celebrated our resurrections together? And wouldn't it be awesome if we all encouraged one another during our crucifixions and reminded ourselves that this is but a blip, a stop along the way that is immortal, eternal, and everlasting? And so it is.
Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.